It's not uncommon for people in Utah to say things like,
Dirty.
Nasty. Ew.
Gross.
when it comes to talking about Utah Lake. But why? Weathered fishermen scoop them up and throw them onto this escalator. Fish scales fall like snowflakes as their ride ends in a giant dumpster of slimy, messy carp. They gape open their mouths, struggling to take their last breath.
They're just a big fish, sucker fish kind of almost.
The Loy family has been pulling truckloads of carp out of Utah Lake, something they have done here for generations.
Well, from what I understand, when Brigham Young settled the valley, he commissioned my great down the line. I'm fifth generation. It was Christopherson at the time to fish for carp for the settlers when they first got here. And then we've just been in business ever since. As I said, I'm the fifth generation.
At Brigham Young's time, fishing on Utah Lake was necessary to feed pioneers. That's why acting fish commissioner Milton Mooser imported the Cyprinius carpino, also known as carp, from Central Europe to lakes and streams in Utah.
Actually, it was the Division of Wildlife back in the day that introduced the species into the lake as a supplemental food fish after it had been exploited by the pioneers for food source.
In the 1880s, Mooser imported 80,000 carp that began to reproduce in large numbers.
So basically it's recruitment of younger fish back into the spawning population. So they have good spawning. And Utah Lake is a perfect place for them to spawn. They like the shallow stuff.
Since the pioneer time, the carp have altered the ecosystem of Utah Lake to suit their own survival. It is estimated that at one time, Utah Lake held more than 7.5 million carp, and at one time took up 90% of the total fish population. The rapidly propagating carp quickly destroyed the native fish habitat in Utah Lake.
There were historically 13 native fish species that lived in the lake, and now we're down to 3 pretty rare species, the June sucker, the Utah sucker, and the Utah chub.
The carp also destroy submerged vegetation that holds sediments in place and provides shelter for native fish.
But also tearing up a lot of the vegetation where the young June suckers would go to hide from predators and grow big enough until it's safe for them to go out into the lake.
Without cover for their young, native fish such as the June sucker become easy prey for white bass, channel catfish, and other predators.
Biologically, they have an impact on what we call nursery habitat, which is along the shorelines. Behaviorally, they uproot the vegetation as they feed, so Utah Lake has very little to no places for young fish to grow up.
In addition to pulling fish out of the lake, they also pump them in. These workers from the State Division of Wildlife Resources grow these June suckers in hatcheries and blast them into the lake by the truckload. Thousands of native fish found only in Utah Lake are reintroduced into the ecosystem. As part of the June Sucker Recovery Program, its goal is to remove this fish from the endangered species list. By planting these fish and measuring their success, biologists can more easily determine the overall health of the lake.
What's good for the June sucker is good for the lake as a whole.
The state of Utah began waging a war on the carp in Utah Lake in 2009. Since that time, they have removed nearly 17.5 million pounds of the trash fish, most of them caught by the Loy fishing operation.
Well, I couldn't put a number to it. Oh, millions. I mean, I probably spent at least 4 months of my life every year on this lake, and I'm 28 years old, so.
Many times the water is so shallow in the lake that the fishermen can get out of the boats and walk as they gather the nets around the swarming fish. The Loys float these flat-bottomed boats in areas where the carp congregate. Like fishermen of old, they put out giant nets to trap them, and some days bring them in by the tons. Literally tons.
I think we have 5 boats out right now. And if we're into the fish, we'll put them in all of them. But I mean, today we'll have 2 boats coming in. One of them has probably close to 7 ton, the other has probably 2.5, 3.
At first, the barges look like boats, but in only a short time, they look like floating fish platters. The fishermen not so elegantly toss out anything that is not a carp.
Yeah, we put them back in the lake, and it's the same with any other, like all the sport fish, the walleye, catfish, large smallmouth bass. We just put them back in the lake and keep the carp.
Usually they have so many carp in the boat that getting the heavy load back is not an easy task.
We whisper quietly to them and they lay flat. You'll have occasional one that'll get a good flip and go back in the lake. Call that filing them. We'll catch him later.
Once on the shore, they shovel the fish into trucks, then ship them to anyone who will take them.
Right now we're just trying to get rid of them wherever we can, so meat farm, landfills. We've had anyone from BYU students, UVU students try to figure out alternative ways to use it for fuel, and one group of people tried to use the scales for some sort of like fingernail hardener.
Eventually, state wildlife biologists hope to reduce the number of carp in Utah Lake to around 30 million pounds, a level they can manage while they restore a habitat that will allow the native fish to flourish.
We're not totally sure what the lake will look like once we get there, but we think that once there's more fish species that are thriving in the lake, it'll clear up the water and allow more vegetation to grow.
As the carp grub through bottom sediments for food, they stir up the silt and increase the turbidity or murkiness of the water.
People think it's polluted or whatever, but it's not. It's just the state of the lake. I mean, it's a highly productive, shallow lake, and it has turnover, and that's what makes it look murky, and the carp contribute to that significantly.
Since the carp have eaten so much of the vegetation, the wind becomes more of a problem on the lake. The maximum depth of the lake is only 14 feet, with an average depth of only 10 feet. So when the wind blows, it causes a lot of wave action on the lake, which also stirs up the silt on the lake bottom, making the water look dirty and polluted.
The middle, unfortunately, is always going to be turbid just because the lake itself has such a big surface area. You have so much fetch, and the wind plays a big part in turning over the sediments out there.
While shallow and murky water may be bad for the fish, some people argue it makes for a better playground.
Utah Lake is shallow, but it's not too shallow. There are places where you can stand up and just, walk back to the boat when you crash.
Crashing is something David knows a thing or two about. Pro wakeboarders typically do.
So I entered my first wakeboard competition when I was 7 years old, and my brother and I have been doing wakeboard competitions for a long time, ever since then. And we usually compete just here in Utah, and just any lake here in Utah where the tournaments go, and it's been a lot of fun. We love to wakeboard.
It's David's love of the sport that keeps him, his brother Tanner, and the rest of the Weeks family coming back to familiar waters, even though others may not share their love for the lake.
A lot of people, I usually hear negative comments about Utah Lake, and a lot of people don't like it. But that's why we love it, because no one really goes there. No matter what everyone says, we know what we like, and so it's, no matter what people say, we love Utah Lake.
The water in Utah Lake doesn't always look enticing. In the late summer months, it turns kind of greenish color because the lake is shallow, warm, and grows a lot of algae.
And sometimes when the water gets really low, it starts to stink. And that's why a lot of people usually stay away from it, but that's why we love it. Yep.
A number of farms surround the lake, and with fluctuating water levels, that can bring some interesting water hazards.
So one time we were boating, and I was riding, and we were wakeboarding, and we passed a dead floating cow in the water. And so I told the boat to turn around, and they flipped back around by the cow, and I actually did a flip over the dead cow.
In addition to water sports, a lot of fishermen cast their lines in Utah Lake.
Been here for 3 hours and caught 7, so a couple weeks ago I was here and went through 2 dozen worms in about 4 hours, so just varies at different days.
Most we've talked with say they throw back what they catch, just enjoying the sport or reeling them in rather than eating the fish. But the fishermen say they catch more than fish in this lake.
We've caught anything from aircraft seats to I've caught a dead ostrich. You know, just whatever's been left behind essentially. So sunglasses, hats, life jackets, boats.
Big objects may not be the only danger in the lake. Some of the objects might be microscopic. Several cattle have reportedly died after drinking water from the lake, and in 2014, 2 dogs suffered a similar fate.
There are issues with algal blooms. They're naturally occurring. They happen in all eutrophic lakes, and if there's a huge mat of algae, it's not recommended that your dog swims through it. But as far as a health concern for people or animals, it's not recommended to drink any untreated water. I mean, yeah, bad.
But the state has done a lot to clean up the water in Utah Lake, and while it doesn't always look clean and clear, some who use it do their own test.
We had an employee actually drink a glass of it before we knew what it was on a bet, a $5 bet. He survived. Well, when we first saw it a couple of years ago, we were driving jet skis and you could just see the green. It was pretty gross looking, and just bet him that he wouldn't drink it. And he did.
Aquatic ecologist Sam Rushforth has been studying the lake for more than 40 years. He says the water quality of the lake has improved in recent years.
And we have seen some blooms in the past that you can see from space. We actually have satellite photographs of Utah Lake showing enormous blooms of algae on the lake. So yeah, it can become pretty problematic, but in general it's not.
But pollution has also been a problem on the lake. Industries dumped sawdust and dye into the lake during the Industrial Revolution. Cities stopped dumping raw sewage into the water in 1967, and the Geneva Steel plant dumped large amounts of toxic waste into the lake for many years.
It was heavily polluted from basically the Industrial Revolution up through the 1960s. Geneva Steel was right along the lake. That caused a lot of pollution, and untreated human waste was put into the lake for a long time. But in the 60s, they kind of started fixing those problems, and Geneva has been gone for over a decade now. So the water isn't clear. You might get sick if you drink it, but you're not going to die. So it's not the cleanest lake, but I would feel very comfortable swimming and doing anything in it. So dirty, yes. Polluted, probably not.
Geneva Steel closed in 2001, and it is now illegal to dump sewage and industry waste into the water. But high levels of algae growth, pH levels, and high concentrations of mineral salts are still problematic. The Utah Division of Water Quality is looking to see to what extent current treatment plants need improvements. For now, the fish are telling their own story.
The carp that are being fished out make a very good protein meal, but if it has excess, in this case the chemicals are PCBs, if they have excess PCBs, then humans don't want to eat this stuff.
But the fish aren't uneatable.
You would have to eat a whole lot of fish to get toxic levels of PCBs from the lake.
However, you may not want to throw all caution to the wind before taking a bite.
They're slightly above the World Health Organization level for safe fish. So at this moment, the carp are being fed to mink or being taken to the landfill.
These PCBs, or polychlorinated biphenyls, are industrial chemicals that are no longer legal. Some say the polluted fish are a direct result from Geneva Steel.
I'm saying it's a very good thing that Geneva Steel is no longer there, because they clearly were putting things in the water. I've studied pores of the lake, and you can see when Geneva Steel came online because there are iron particles in the microscopic samples of the cores.
But even though the Geneva plant is gone, Rushforth claims the pollution remains.
What I am worried about is that I have looked at the log data of Geneva's test wells on their site, and they do have very high levels of organic pollutants. And oftentimes these water aquifers move towards lower levels in the aquifer, and so they would be moving towards Utah Lake.
The pressure to clean up the lake increases as development moves closer and closer to the water.
Saratoga Springs, which is a newer community that's growing really fast, those residents speak out more than anyone else about the improvements that they want to see. So I'm sure the new people that are moving in towards Vineyard or kind of on the southwest side, they'll voice their opinion about the improvements that they want to see. And the more people that speak out about it, the more money we'll be able to get to improve the lake. So that'll be a benefit, in my opinion.
However, construction on the old Geneva property could increase pollution in the lake.
It has the potential to be a serious problem.
Rushforth claims that the test wells at the former Geneva Steel site show the groundwater is rich with pollutants, posing threats to future development around the property and to the lake.
And I think it's very interesting that we're going to get lots more human development out there. They're going, watch, there are going to be subdivisions, there already are. There's a golf course out there. There are going to be malls and all kinds of things. And we really need to be aware of the issue of the groundwater and how polluted it is and its potential for polluting the lake. And if that potential exists, we're going to have to draw the water up and treat it and put it back in the ground. So that's another potential problem for the lake and for community health.
There are many projects being done to help clean up Utah Lake and its shoreline, but Utahns can be assured there are more projects to come. In 2015, the state legislature appropriated $1 million to make improvements at Utah Lake.
They are going to be dredging the Provo Marina next spring. And I don't know if you've been there, but it's probably maybe 10 acres worth. And it's going to cost $1.5 million. So to dredge a significant amount of the lake would be in the hundreds of millions, maybe billions of dollars. So as far as dredging way out into the lake, it's not really a realistic possibility, but keeping the marinas dredged can happen over time. So
the state is also developing a trail system around the lake, and hundreds of homes and businesses are in the works to be built on or near the former Geneva Steel site.
I think in the future the lake we will realize the lake is much more important than we ever have in the past.
It took 100 years to destroy the ecosystem at Utah Lake, and it will take many more years to make things better. While the lake is improving, it is crucial to recognize the need for continued efforts. The threats to Utah Lake are not all gone. But the people who live around and use these waters know that with each continued effort, the lake will only become more of a treasure for future generations.
I think everybody just needs to have like one good experience down at the lake.
There's nice fish in here. There's a lot of fish in here.
Utah Lake's the best.
Just be considerate and value it for what it is as the resource.
Yeah, I think just the utilization of Utah Lake and getting the word out that it's not contaminated, I think that helps Utah Lake immensely.
I think it's a vastly underutilized lake.
As I say, I've looked at the lake for 40 years, and I can see changes in the lake. I don't see degradation, I see improvement.
I would just invite people to get out there, give it a chance. You might have had a bad experience in the past, but like I said earlier, things are looking bright. Those who plan on raising their kids here have a great gem down there, a great resource to have a lot of great experiences.